Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, all honor, and all glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Harakakwadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and the elders of GMS that rule well. Those are the true prophets of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, if you want to believe that or not. And those are the men who I learned this truth from. All right. Those are the men that the Lord, Yahweh, and Yahweh Shai is dealing with. All right. You know, GMS and the affiliates, okay? All right, double honors to GMS, man. You know, the elders of GMS, okay? Because those are the men who I learned this truth from, okay? I didn't learn this on my own. And I want to say peace, love, and salutations to the elect of the nation of Israel, the true nation of Israel, Yasharallah, okay? Because that's what this truth is for, and that's why we do these videos every day and go out there to the highways and byways, you know, every week. All right, we do it for the elect, to wake up the elect. All right, so we can get up on that here, man. All right, quick lesson, man. Here's a TikTok. I'm doing a lesson on this TikTok, man. You know, this is Bol Bol. All right, I was talking about him in one of my previous lessons about, you know, Israel and Egypt. Even in the Egyptians, the Lord put a difference between them. You know, the Hamites being the Egyptians, all right, the modern day Egyptians, all right, you know, the native Africans, and the nation of Israel, the so-called blacks, all right, of the nation of Israel, the southern kingdom, all right, the black people over here, okay, in the Americas, in Jamaica and Haiti, all right, you know, and also scattered amongst Northern Kingdom, the Latinos and the Native Americans, okay? That's the Southern Kingdom. But you'll also get that lineage, that bloodline, you know, an Israelite mingled, you know, amongst the heathens, looking like the heathens. How is an Israelite mingled amongst the heathens? By the act of having kids with the Gentiles, the natural Gentiles, you know, having kids with the heathens. And those kids from that father's lineage, that Israelite father, that Israelite man, his kids with that heathen woman are going to look like heathens. And if he has a son with that heathen woman, that son might have kids with a heathen woman, and his kids are going to have Israelite babies looking even more like the heathens. And then over time, you know, the bloodline, the seed line, all right, the lineage of that Israelite father, Israelite man, all right, over time they're gonna look straight up heathen, man. All right, and the only way to differentiate, you know, an Israelite from a heathen, okay, because we're mingled amongst the heathens, is by judging that man's spirit, okay. All right, does he carry himself like an Israelite, you know, like a Jake, like a, you know, is he spiritual? Does he have talents? Is he godly? You know, is he godlike? You know, does he shine out from the rest of the heathens? You know, is he an outcast? You know, that's another sign. You know, does he have a zeal for the Lord? Does he believe in the Lord? You know, a God, a higher power. You know, is he zealous for the Lord? Because that's a characteristic of an Israelite. Ultimately, does that man or woman have characteristics of an Israelite? You know? And how do you find out what the characteristics of the Israelites are, man? It's in the Bible. We're the salt of the earth. We are gods amongst men. The Lord says, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. You know, we're the salt of the earth. We're the flavor of the earth, you know? You know, we have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge, you know? So yeah, man, you know. So I'm gonna show you this TikTok. You tell me.
Got Bol Bol versus D1 players. Come here.
This guy's an
no way.
Or not, even though he looks like a Hamite.
What you finna do? Oh my God, wraparound? All the way, another one again? Bro, he might be better than Wemby, bro. Here, snatch. Come here, pick up. Oh my God, bro, what? How tall is he? Like 7'6"? There's no way, bro. 360 lay? Oh, come here. And he has a handle, snatch, sidestep? No way. KD? Bro's like Wemby and KD mixed, bro. Come here. Pull up. Try ball. Oh, bro, he's cold, bro. What? Transition handle pickup? In motion fade? What? Tray ball from deep? And he got Stephen Curry's range? Nah, I'm not gonna lie, he might be better than Wemby, bro. This nigga's cold. Got Bol Bol versus D.
You know, that's this guy's an Israelite, man. He a Jake, you know. His dad played in the NBA, and this guy currently plays in the NBA, man. Bol Bol, All right, he plays for who did he play for? I forgot. The Suns. I think he's still playing with the Suns. He be coming off the bench and whatnot. But yeah, it's like just tired. Just got off the plantation. But yeah, this is the Jake, man. Another way, he also be pulling. He be pulling Jake women, man. All right, he got swag to him. I seen some pictures of him. TikToks about him. So the way he plays basketball, yeah. Of course, Vocab Malone would be like, so if you're good at basketball or good at playing ball, that makes you an Israelite. Yeah, man. If you're really good at it, if you shine from the rest, if you're white, so-called white, if you're so-called Asian, Arab, so-called African-looking, so-called Arabian-looking, Elamite, Indian-looking, Eskimo-looking. But if you got a special talent, like a really good talent, and you shine, from the rest of the people, most likely you're an Israelite, man. Because the scriptures say, I'm going to get it, man. You're the salt of the earth. All right? Because this isn't a black thing like Malcolm says, man. Elder Malcolm, man. And he's right. This thing isn't about being black, or being a Latino or being a Native American looking. All right, you'll get Israelites looking like a non-Israelite, but they're actually an Israelite. How do we know? Because we judge them by their spirit. The way they carry themselves, the way they act, the way they think, the way they worship. We judge their spirit. And how do we judge someone's spirit? By asking them questions when they're out there on the highways and byways, And, the word aura, is popular now. And, if you have a different aura, if you have a godlike, Israelite aura about you, doesn't matter what you look like, man. As in like skin color wise. Yeah, you may look Somalian, but if your spirit, if your bloodline goes back to an Israelite man, you're an Israelite. You're gonna be acting different from the rest of the rest of the Somalians, the heathens. There's Israelites amongst all the nations. This is Matthew 5:13. It says, ye, speaking about us Israelites, man. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savor, all right, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. We're the salt of the earth, but we're good for nothing. Without Yahweh Shai. That's why we're at the bottom of the bottom. We fill up the ghettos, the slums, the reservations, etc., man. We're at the bottom because, we're Israelites, but, we have transgressed and went against our true power, Yahweh Pashem Yahweh Shai. Therefore, the Lord punishes us. The curses follow us. And if the curses are upon a heathen man or woman, most likely that person's an Israelite, because the curses will follow you, man. Even amongst the heathens. Some curses are on on an Israelite man or woman harder than the other ones. But because some Jakes prosper, some Jakes got it worse than another Jake. Some got it less. So, because those East Indians and the slums around the world, man. Okay, all right, a lot of those slums. All right, if you know what a slum is, those are Israelites. Those are Jakes, looking like the heathens, but they're actually Israelites because their father's bloodline goes all the way back to an Israelite man. Okay. All right. Let me see. Look at this word. Let me get this one. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Okay? And, doesn't matter what you look like. What matters is what lineage, what bloodline you go back to. All right? And if your bloodline goes back to an Israelite, all right, you're going to have the spirit of an Israelite. All right? Because the spirit is carried through the bloodline of the Father. All right? Let me get that. Numbers 1 and 18. And I've done many lessons on this, man. On this topic. It's just plain as day to me. To us. Numbers 1 and 18. It says, and they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers. It didn't say mothers, but their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward by their polls. Okay? It made mention, the point was the fathers, because your lineage goes back to through your father's seed line, because men carry the seed. Women don't. They give birth, they flower, they nurture the seed, all right? And the seed comes out of them, by way of a child, okay? Just like plants, if you study plants, there's male plants and female plants. Males give off pollen, and then the woman plant, receives the pollen and whatnot, and then her seeds are they give forth fruit. All right, the kids, she gives forth fruit in the seeds, or in the fruit and whatnot. You know what I mean? So yeah, man, the spirit is carried through the father's seed. All right, and men carry seed. All right, sperma. Okay. All right. Let me get this. Visiting. Exodus 34 and 7. It says, keeping mercy. Exodus 34 and 6. It says, and the Lord passed by before him and proclaimed the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth. Verse 7, keeping mercies for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children unto the third and to the fourth generation, because you are reincarnated through your father's seed line. You've been here before. All right, that's why the scriptures say there's no remembrance of former things. You don't remember your past life? I don't remember what the hell I did in my past life. The Lord wants it like that. But you've been here before through your father's bloodline. All right, that's why you are like your father. You have characteristics of your father, man. When it comes to looks and characteristics, like the way you act and talk and whatnot, you know, because the spirit is carried through the father's seed line. You know, yeah, you're gonna look like your mother. Yeah, if you live with your mother for, your mother raised you. Of course, you're gonna get characteristics of your mother too. But you are who your father is. You're not your father, but you are of your father's lineage. All right. And your father was probably your father in your past life or another past life before, man. Or your father was probably possibly your son at one point, or your grandpa was your son at one point, etc. You know, you know. That's why it says third or fourth generation, because the bloodline, the seed, the spirit, okay, is carried through your father's bloodline, okay. Because you die, your spirit goes to the Heavenly Father, in the spiritual realm. You wait a couple generations and bang, the Lord reincarnates you through your father's bloodline, and bang, here you are again, serving, the judgments, of what you did in your past life, man. What you did in your past life, you're being judged for it now in this life, bang, and a father, an Israelite man might have kids. Well, it's happened many times and it's still happening. An Israelite man, he'll have kids, with a heathen woman, but those kids are Israelites because they're kids of the father. It's the father's seed, not the mother's seed. They're not half Israelite, half heathen. Maybe they will by looks, but spiritually, their spirit and their spirit is an Israelite, man. And let's say those kids have kids, and let's say the sons of that Israelite man, all right, have kids with more heathen women, and it happens over and over again. Over time, the kids are gonna look straight up indifferential from a heathen when it comes to looks, but the spirit is still there.
One players, come here.
Spirit is still there, man. Okay, just and it shows right here. Who else hoops like that? Who else plays ball like that on earth? Israelites. Especially Southern Kingdom. He's black. It's not a black thing, man. There's a lot of Hamites, Africans, who can't ball. They can, they got no flavor. They can't dance. And some can, but they don't got flavor. They don't act the same as black people, so-called black people on this side of the world, in the Americas, and in Europe and whatnot. There's a difference. The Lord has made a difference between the Egyptian and the Israelite, But you'll get an Israelite who looks like the other people, the heathens, because the seed, the fathers are having kids with those heathen women. So those kids are going to look like heathens, I'm just going to, I'm just repeating what I'm saying, man. If you don't get it at this point, hey, that's your fault, man. Because, hey, if you don't get it, the Lord really ain't dealing with you, man. All right? Because we're making it plain as day. No excuses, Jake. Let me see. Let's get Hellenistas. Yeah. Helen. All right, Hellenistas. All right. All right. It says, it's a Greek speaking Jew, I'm trying to find where it says it, man. It's a Jew that that speaks Greek, because our people are not going to be speaking Hebrew all the time. We're going to be speaking the other nation's language, okay? Let's get a G. All right. These Greek words are in the Bible, man. All right. Phile. All right. Is that what it says? Fule? Oh, I thought it was phile. All right. It says, all the persons descending from one of the 12 tribes of the patriarch Jacob, the Israelites, you know. So let's see, what was Revelation 5 and 9? Okay, Revelation 5 and 9, it says, and they sung a new song, saying, thou art worthy to take the book, to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to Yahweh by the blood of every kindred. All right, Christians will be like, every kindred, okay, everybody. That means everybody on earth. And then there's G, so G 5 it says 54 and 43. All right, it says, and tongue and people and nation. A Christian will read that, be like, oh, so it's talking about everybody, even the Gentiles, even the heathens. No, it's talking about the Israelites mingled amongst the Gentiles, the natural Gentiles, mingled amongst the heathens, talking like the heathens and acting like them and worshiping their gods and all that, man. Having kids with them, looking like them, okay? And what did what Greek word was used for that? Phile, or phule, which means, again, it says persons descending from one of the 12 tribes, sons of the patriarch Jacob, It didn't say everybody on earth. It didn't say every single nation. No, it specifically said the 12 tribes. So the 12 tribes are going to be mingled amongst the heathens, looking like them too, I'm just going to pull out a random precept. Acts 2 verse 5. I got a whole bunch of precepts down. This is part of my notes, but I didn't write down, this is Acts 2 and 5. It says, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, all right, Israelites, all right, devout men out of every nation under heaven. It says out of every nation under heaven. Speaking about everybody, man. So it says Jews, Israelites, devout men, the Lord's people, out of every nation, because we're mingled amongst every nation. Therefore we're going to be looking like the other nations, because we're going to have kids with the other nations, and those kids are Israelites looking like the other nations, man. Do you get it, you Christians? John 7 verse 33. It says, then said Yahweh unto them, yet a little while am I with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. All right, ye shall seek me and shall not find me, and where I am, thither ye cannot come. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go, that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed amongst the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? Why did it say that? It's because the Israelites are amongst the Gentiles. Okay? That's why it said that, man. Because that's what the Lord was doing, man. All right? and the blue letter. It says the dispersed among the Gentiles, all right, and teach the Gentiles. Why did it say dispersed? Who's dispersed among the Gentiles? And why would the Lord go teach the Gentiles? You know? So who's dispersed amongst the Gentiles? So if the Lord came on earth to preach to the Gentiles, why is the dispersed amongst the Gentiles made mention? Who's being dispersed? The Israelites. So the Lord went to go to the Gentiles, all right, because the Israelites are amongst and dispersed amongst the Gentiles. Having kids with the Gentiles, that's how they're dispersed, all right. So I read that a little bit too fast, So this is, I want to get Isaiah. This is meant to be quick, but it's like, it's longer than I thought it would be. I just want to make it plain, man. Isaiah 11:1, it says, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. That's not what I wanted. First Samuel 16:7, it says, but the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, right, the outer appearance of a man, or the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord, all right, seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh in the heart. Because within you, all right, your heart, your mind, is where your spirit resides, man, all right? Okay, an Israelite, Israelite will have the mindset or spirit of an Israelite. Okay, it doesn't matter what he looks like,